He loves philosophy. For the Rambam, okay, I mean, I have to pick 2 or 3 points about the Rambam because we need to move on, but for the Rambam says, look, we can basically, you can understand, there's a consciousness that you need to understand about the Middle Ages. And sometimes we forget this when we're talking philosophically. In the 12th and 13th centuries, amongst thinkers in Europe, Aristotle was science. It wasn't just philosophy, it was a way of looking at the world that was regarded pretty much the way that today we would look at science. Slightly different, but very, very much in that consciousness. There was a growing need to have to reconcile and synthesize Aristotelian thought and Torah. The Rambam responds by basically saying this. First of all, the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, which is an incredibly difficult book to summarize. We can accept all of the axioms of Aristotle, except one. Aristotle's got a whole list of axioms. Aristotle's big on categorizing and taxonomically dividing up reality so that you can look at things and categorize them and understand where everything fits so that you can contemplate that and work out the universals and abstract them from there. It's a very, very big shift in mental thought, in human thought. But the Rambam says that we can accept all of the axioms of Aristotle except one. Aristotle, hi dude, how are you? Aristotle argues that the world is eternal, and the Rambam says, no, it's not. I mean, for the Rambam, why is it not? Because at the end of the day, we have a pasuk. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. God creates the world. Therefore,
the Rambam in the Medrash says if you could prove scientifically that the cat was island,
yes.
so he would be forced to believe it.
See, the Rambam is a little different from Saja. Saja is saying that revelation must accord with reason. The Rambam is saying that revelation and reason are effectively the same thing. I think that for the Rambam, would probably argue, I mean he's not here, but I know the point you're making, and it's a very good one. I think the Rambam would say that you therefore, I mean the Rambam actually says that you can prove it. He's open to the idea that there are different proofs and so on for Kadmut HaOlam, for the eternality of the world, but unlike other thinkers, we'll look at in a second, the Rambam actually tells you that even if you could prove it, we can't accept it. We have a pasuk that says that God creates the world.
That's what it says. The Rambam says clearly that the eternal existence of the world is something that can't be proven either way. You have no proof. Since we have no proof,
that's what I'm saying.
We accept revelation, even though one makes sense, might make sense.
Okay.
The other.
You're right. You're right. You've put that slightly differently from how I put it, but I'm agreeing with you totally. I'm agreeing with you totally. The Rambam says that if you could prove it, but you can't prove it,
That's a very important point.
Yeah, it is an important point. There are different ways. It's open. The question is open, and therefore we accept revelation.
The point is, if you have a puzzle that says black and white like this, but it can be proven 100% that it is not so, we would have to somehow explain.
I must point out that you and I are not the first people who will be discussing how you wrote the Rambam. But yeah, no, you're right. But more in the book here. No, I'm agreeing with you.
It's a philosophy first, theologian second. He's a theologian because of the conflict with success. If what they're saying is true.
Okay.
I'm saying the
No. I know the point you're making. Yeah. The Rambam
would have told him that the world was eternal, and he would have put his faith aside, right?
Yeah. I might come back to that point. There's a bit more to it than what we're saying, and I'm sure you're aware of that. But that's a good way that you've explained it. The Rambam is saying basically that
we can accept revelation as long as it's not contradicting some facts.
But the question is, what's a known fact for the Rambam? The Rambam is actually open to the idea that these things might be.
A known fact is something that can be logically 100% proven.
Okay, let me come back. All right, I'm hearing you saying I'm agreeing. The Rambam is also very, very emphatic on this idea that philosophy leads ultimately to the level of enlightenment that we call nevuah. I'm scared now to talk about more nevuah, but that philosophical enlightenment leads to what we call nuvuah, what we call prophecy. In a sense, yeah, are you happy with that? Yeah? No.
Actually,
Yeah.
Yes, you are happy.
Yeah, you're happy with that? In fact, the Rambam pretty much lays out the fact that anyone that is able to think hard enough and contemplate. But the Rambam's got a very, very unique understanding of the concept of Ahavat Hashem, of the love of God. The love of God is effectively the intellectual contemplation of God. That leads to Nuvuah, it leads to prophecy. In fact, it so much leads to it that the one person who wrote a mystical commentary on it, I know that's difficult to understand. Who wrote a mystical commentary on the Moreh Nevuchim?
I don't know.
Abulafia.
Oh,
Abulafia actually gives you techniques on how to arrive at prophecy, special breathing exercises, meditational exercises. He's the dude that thought that the Moreh Nevuchim was in fact a Kabbalistic mystical text with all sorts of hidden secrets inside it.
he's not the first one to say that anybody can be a Navi.
No, the Rambam's not saying anyone can be a Navi. That's the point. The Rambam is actually saying you need to be a very, very high level philosopher.
No, but anybody could get, if a person wanted to get to that level,
Yes.
he could get to that level. and become
Yeah,
a
but
Navi.
you need a derech by which to
Right,
do it.
you need a derech.
You need a derech.
But
The Rambam is extremely controversial. It's no coincidence that people were burning his books for a couple of generations afterwards. The Rambam is very, very controversial. There's a huge emphasis on not only the worldly Aristotelian thought. I mean, don't forget the Rambam also has a unique approach, similar to Sadja, but beyond it. How did Sadja, we never actually addressed this, how did Sadja address the claims, the accusations of Hag Shama, of corporeality, accused by the Kalam? How did Sadja actually do this? And it's a thought that then picked up later by the Rambam, and the idea is that these things, such as the hand of God and the eyes of God, are, of course, intellectual allegories. It's not the case, this is not a cop-out. This is not the case where I say, I'm subjugating the obvious meaning of the text to a philosophical idea, but reason tells me, and I know of the incorporeality of God, therefore these modes of description must be allegories that tell me about the interaction between the divine and the world. The hand of God is the power of God. The eyes of God is the providence of God.
That makes the assumption, sorry, but it makes the assumption that the
You don't have to apologize to me. It's we're talking about Sajja and the
No,
Rambam.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that
No.
that is assuming that the author of those verses, had that in mind, that had the same concept of God as you did. Just because you came up with, a philosophical explanation of what you consider God doesn't mean that the author of the Bible had that in mind when he wrote the hand of God, or I enjoy the smell of sacrifices, or whatever it is.
Yeah. That's a brilliant, brilliant point. But it's also a point that no doubt could be applied to just about any of the entire Midrashic project. The whole of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the whole of the oral dimension of Torah relies on the fact that we have an understanding of the intent of the author of the Bible. Yeah, it's a very, very good point. Because they've got to assume the incorporeality of God. And they say, well, what are these things doing? They must be describing modes of interaction of the divine. They must be allegories. But it's a very, very good point. And obviously, various critics have come along and pointed that out. I could spend a lot more on the Rambam. For the Rambam, mitzvot, therefore, are pathways, more or less, to philosophical enlightenment. This got him in a lot of hot water. The resurrection of the dead for the Rambam is basically an intellectual, spiritual resurrection. It's not in a body, famously in contradistinction to the Ramban, who said Nachmanides, who came just after the Rambam, who said that, of course, it was in a body and it's a full physical resurrection. There are many, many aspects of the Rambam where he emphasizes again and again and again that Judaism is an intellectual project.